Late in the evening, with the city buzzing and the streetlights casting a dim glow, Officer Daniels was on his usual patrol route. As he drove slowly through the bustling streets, his trained eyes scanned the surroundings. The night was chilly, and most people were heading to the warmth of their homes. However, something unusual caught his attention near a dark alley between two old brick buildings. There, huddled against the cold concrete, were two small figures. As he approached, he could see that they were children, looking no older than 10 years old. Their clothes were thin and worn, hardly enough to keep out the cold night air. Officer Daniels felt a pang in his heart as he drew closer. The kids looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes that reflected the harsh streetlights. "Hey there, are you two okay?" Officer Daniels asked in the gentlest tone he could muster, kneeling to make himself less intimidating. The twins, a boy and a girl, glanced at each other before the girl nodded slowly. "We're okay, but we're lost and really cold," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are your names?" Officer Daniels asked, trying to keep the conversation light to gain their trust. "I'm Maya, and this is my twin brother, Mia," she replied, holding her brother's hand tightly. It struck Officer Daniels how they depended on each other, the bond between them palpable even in the dim light. "Where are your parents?" he continued, aware that the question might bring up painful memories. The twins exchanged a look, and it was Mia who answered this time, his voice shaky. "Our grandma was taking care of us, but she's gone to heaven. We don't have anyone else, and we don't know where to go," he explained, trying hard not to cry. Officer Daniels felt his eyes moisten as he listened to their heart-wrenching story. It was moments like these that reminded him why he joined the police force, not just to enforce the law, but to make a real difference in people's lives, especially those as vulnerable as Maya and Mia. Knowing he needed to act quickly, he radioed the station to inform them of the situation, requesting advice on what to do next. While waiting for a response, he opened the back door of his patrol car. "Come on, let's get you two somewhere warm," he said, offering them a reassuring smile. Reluctantly, but too cold to protest, the twins got into the car. Officer Daniels turned up the heater, watching the twins slowly relax as warmth seeped into their small bodies. As they drove towards the police station, Officer Daniels made a silent promise to himself and to them. He would do whatever it took to ensure Maya and Mia had a safe place to stay tonight. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for now, he had given them a glimmer of hope, a warm car, and a chance to find safety. As Officer Daniels drove, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the twins clutching each other's hands for comfort. It was clear they were exhausted and scared, but at least for the moment, they were safe and warm. Arriving at the station, he gently explained to Maya and Mia what was going to happen next. "We're going to go inside where it's warm, and you'll have some food. You can rest there while I figure out the best place for you two tonight," he reassured them. Stepping into the brightly lit lobby of the police station, the twins hesitated, their eyes scanning the unfamiliar environment. Officer Daniels stayed close to their side, guiding them with a gentle hand on their shoulders. Inside, he introduced them to Officer Lee, who greeted them with a warm, friendly smile. "We're going to take good care of you," Officer Lee said as she led them to a small room where they could be more comfortable. The room had a couch and a small television, which immediately caught the twins' attention. Officer Lee brought them some sandwiches and hot chocolate, which Maya and Mia accepted gratefully. As they ate, Officer Daniels and Officer Lee exchanged concerned glances, silently agreeing that they needed to take quick action to help these vulnerable kids. Officer Daniels then sat down next to the twins, his tone soft and comforting. "Can you tell me more about what happened? It might help us find the best way to help you," he gently prodded. Maya wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and began to share their story. They had been living with their grandmother in a small apartment not too far from the station, but when she passed away unexpectedly a few weeks ago, they found themselves wandering the streets, unsure of where to go or whom to turn to. The landlord kicked us out because we couldn't pay the rent," Mia added, his voice breaking with the burden of his sudden responsibilities. Maya chimed in, her voice just as shaky. "We didn't want to trouble anyone, so we didn't ask for help. We thought we could manage, but it's been really hard." Officer Daniels listened intently, his heart sinking with each word. It was one of those moments that reminded him of the harsh realities that so many face and the resilience of those who endure them. He reassured them, "You did the right thing by coming to us. You're not alone anymore, and we're going to make sure you're both taken care of." After the conversation, Officer Daniels stepped out of the room to speak with social services. He explained the urgency of the situation, emphasizing the need for immediate intervention to provide a safe, temporary home for Maya and Mia. His voice was firm, driven by a newfound determination to ensure that the system worked for the twins, not against them. Returning to the room, he saw that the twins had finished their meal and were now watching a children's program on the television, a small distraction from their worries. He sat down again, offering a smile that he hoped would convey his commitment to their well-being. "You're going to stay here tonight, where it's safe," he told them, watching relief wash over their faces. "Tomorrow, we'll work on finding you a more permanent place where you can start anew. I promise you, things are going to get better." As Maya and Mia nodded, their expressions mixed with hope and anxiety, Officer Daniels felt a deep resolve solidify within him. He was going to make sure that these twins, thrown into uncertainty and fear, would have their chance at a new beginning. The next morning, Officer Daniels arrived early at the station, his mind set on the tasks ahead. As he walked through the quiet halls, he thought about Maya and Mia, sleeping just a few doors down. Their plight had deeply affected him, and he felt a personal responsibility to help steer their lives towards stability. He made his way to the room where the twins had spent the night. As he opened the door, he found them awake, sitting on the couch, their eyes red from what looked like a restless night. They managed small smiles as he greeted them with a cheerful, "Good morning. I've arranged for some breakfast for you too," he said as he handed them each a bag containing a simple breakfast sandwich and a juice box. The twins thanked him, their politeness a stark reminder of their situation. Officer Daniels watched them eat, noting their subdued manner. It was clear the reality of their situation was setting in now that the sun was up. Once they finished eating, Officer Daniels sat down across from them, ready to discuss the plan for the day. "Today, we're going to do everything we can to find you a safe place to stay. I've already made some calls to different places that help kids in your situation," he explained. The twins listened intently, their faces a mix of hope and nervousness. Officer Daniels had contacted several local shelters and foster care services the previous night, explaining the urgency of the twins' situation. The responses had been mixed, with many places at full capacity, which was disheartening. However, there was a promising lead from a nearby children's home that specialized in emergency placements. He explained this to Maya and Mia, trying to keep the mood optimistic. "We have a good option that might work out. It's a place not too far from here where kids who need a safe place to stay temporarily can go. They're used to helping kids just like you," he reassured them. The twins nodded, the weight of their situation evident in their hesitant acceptance. Officer Daniels could see they were scared of the unknown, but he was determined to provide them with a sense of security. "I'll be with you every step of the way," he promised. After a few phone calls and arrangements, Officer Daniels drove the twins to the children's home. The car ride was quiet, with Maya and Mia looking out the windows, deep in thought. Officer Daniels tried to lighten the mood with small talk about the home, its friendly staff, and the other children they might meet. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Ms. Johnson, the director of the home, who gave them a warm, welcoming smile. "We're very happy to have you here, Maya and Mia. We'll take good care of you," she said, her tone gentle and reassuring. Officer Daniels watched as Ms. Johnson gave them a tour of the home, showing them where they would be sleeping, the play areas, and the dining hall. The home was cheerful, with bright paintings on the walls and a friendly atmosphere. It was a relief to see the twins slowly relaxing as they were introduced to a couple of other children. As the day ended, Officer Daniels had to leave, but not before ensuring that everything was in place for the twins. He promised to check in on them soon, his heart heavy but hopeful. Driving back to the station, he felt a mix of emotions. He was saddened by the twins' circumstances, but grateful that they were now in a safe place. He knew the journey ahead would be challenging for them, but he was committed to being there, supporting them as they navigated this new chapter of their lives. Officer Daniels couldn't stop thinking about Maya and Mia. Even after dropping them off at the children's home, his heart remained heavy. He had done his best to find them a safe place, but he knew their journey was far from over. That night, as he sat at his desk, he decided to check on them the next day. He wanted to make sure they were adjusting well, and more importantly, that they knew they weren't alone. Early the next morning, he drove back to the children's home. When he arrived, Ms. Johnson greeted him with a kind smile. "The twins are settling in," she told him. "They were quiet at first, but they've started to open up a little." That was a relief, but Officer Daniels still wanted to see them for himself. Walking through the hallways, he could hear children laughing and playing in the common area. When he stepped inside, his eyes quickly found Maya and Mia sitting together at a small table, coloring in their notebooks. He noticed that, although they were with the other kids, they still stuck close to each other, as if afraid to be separated. When Maya looked up and saw him, her face brightened with surprise. "Officer Daniels," she called out, nudging Mia, who looked up with the same expression of relief. They both stood up and ran to him, and for the first time since he met them, they looked genuinely happy. "You came back," Mia said, his voice filled with something that sounded like both excitement and disbelief. "Of course I did," Officer Daniels replied with a warm smile. "I told you I'd check on you." The twins led him to their seats, showing off their drawings. Maya had drawn a small house with a garden, while Mia had drawn a police car that looked a lot like Officer Daniels. He chuckled at the details and nodded. "These are really good. You two are talented." As they talked, he learned that the children's home was treating them well. They had warm meals, a cozy room, and even a few toys. But even with these comforts, he could tell they were still adjusting. "Do you like it here?" he asked gently. Maya nodded slowly. "It's nice," she admitted, "but it doesn't feel like home." Mia added, "We miss our grandma." Officer Daniels' heart ached for them. Losing someone so important at such a young age was hard, and no matter how much help they received, it wouldn't fill that empty space in their hearts. But he knew he couldn't let them feel like they were forgotten. "You're not alone," he said softly. "There are people who care about you and want to help, and I'm one of them." Maya and Mia looked at him with wide eyes, as if trying to believe his words. It was clear they had been let down before, and trusting someone again wasn't easy for them. But as they smiled, even just a little, Officer Daniels knew that he had given them something they needed: hope. As he left the home that day, he made a silent promise. He wouldn't just be a stranger who helped once and disappeared. He would continue checking on them, making sure they found a real place to belong. Officer Daniels couldn't shake the feeling that Maya and Mia needed more than just a safe place to stay. The children's home was doing its best, but it wasn't the same as having a real family. That thought stayed with him as he sat in his patrol car later that evening, staring at the quiet city streets. He knew the twins deserved more than temporary shelter. They needed a home where they felt loved and wanted. The next morning, he decided to take action. He reached out to a few contacts, hoping to find someone who could provide a long-term home for the twins. He called social services again, pressing them for updates on potential foster families. But the answers were the same. There were few families available, and the process would take time. Not willing to accept that, he decided to take a different approach. He reached out to a few trusted people in the community, hoping someone might be able to help. That was when he remembered Mrs. Carter, a kind woman who had fostered children before. She and her husband had raised their own children, and now, with their house feeling empty, they had opened their doors to kids in need. He gave her a call. "Mrs. Carter, I have a situation," he said, explaining everything about Maya and Mia. He described their resilience, their kindness, and how much they deserved a loving home. There was silence on the other end for a moment before Mrs. Carter finally spoke. "Bring them over," she said gently. "I'd love to meet them." Excited but cautious, Officer Daniels drove to the children's home. When he arrived, he found Maya and Mia sitting in the playroom, quietly drawing. They looked up when they saw him, their eyes lighting up in recognition. "You came back again," Maya said with a small smile. "Of course," he said, sitting down beside them. "I have something important to tell you." The twins listened carefully as he explained. "There's a really nice lady named Mrs. Carter. She takes care of kids who need a home. She wants to meet you too." Mia's eyes widened. "A real home?" he asked hesitantly. "A real home," Officer Daniels confirmed. "She and her husband are kind people, and they've helped kids like you before. You don't have to decide anything right now, but I thought you might like to meet them." The twins looked at each other, communicating without words. They had been through so much loss, so many changes, but deep down they longed for a place to belong. "Okay," Maya said softly. "We'll meet them." Later that day, Officer Daniels drove them to the Carter's house. It was a cozy, welcoming home with a big yard and a warm atmosphere. Mrs. Carter greeted them at the door with a gentle smile. "You must be Maya and Mia," she said kindly. "Come in. I made cookies." As they stepped inside, Officer Daniels could see the nervous hope in their eyes. This wasn't just another stop. It could be a new beginning. As Maya and Mia stepped into the Carter's home, they hesitated for a moment, looking around nervously. The house smelled of something sweet, like freshly baked cookies, and the walls were lined with pictures of smiling faces. It felt warm and welcoming, but they had been through so much uncertainty that they weren't sure if they could let themselves feel safe just yet. Mrs. Carter, with her kind eyes and soft voice, knelt down to their level. "Would you like some cookies?" she asked with a smile, holding out a plate of warm chocolate chip treats. The twins looked at each other before nodding slowly. Maya took one first, nibbling on the edge, while Maya followed, taking a cautious bite. The taste of real, homemade cookies made them pause. It reminded them of their grandmother, of a time when they had felt loved and cared for. As they ate, Mrs. Carter led them to the living room, where her husband, Mr. Carter, was waiting. He was an older man with a gentle face and a calm presence. "Welcome, kids," he said warmly. "We've heard a lot about you from Officer Daniels." Mia looked up at Officer Daniels, who nodded encouragingly. "Only good things," he assured them. The Carters took their time getting to know the twins. They asked about their favorite things: books, colors, games. Slowly, Maya and Mia started to open up. Maya loved to draw, and Mia liked watching nature documentaries. The Carters listened to every word, genuinely interested in what made the twins happy. After a little while, Mrs. Carter showed them around the house. "If you decide to stay with us, this could be your room," she said, opening a door to a cozy space with 2 twin beds, soft blankets, and stuffed animals. "You can decorate it however you like." The twins stepped inside, their eyes wide. It was simple, but it felt safe. Maya ran his fingers over the soft fabric of the blankets, while Maya touched the small bookshelf near the bed. "Are we really allowed to stay here?" Maya finally asked, her voice small. Mrs. Carter knelt beside her, taking her hand gently. "Only if you want to," she said. "We won't force you. We just want you to have a place where you feel safe and loved." Mia looked up at Officer Daniels. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. Officer Daniels crouched down beside him. "I think the Carters are good people, but this is your choice. No one is making you decide right now. You take your time, okay?" The twins nodded, still unsure, but for the first time in a long while, they felt something they hadn't felt in months: hope. As the evening came, it was time to leave. The Carters let them know they were welcome anytime, and if they wanted, they could come back for a longer visit soon. As Officer Daniels drove them back to the children's home, he noticed something different. For the first time since he had met them, they didn't look scared. They looked like kids who were starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a home again. For the next few days, Maya and Mia couldn't stop thinking about the Carters' home. The warmth of the house, the kindness of Mrs. Carter, the gentle way Mr. Carter spoke to them. It all felt so different from what they had been used to. At the children's home, they were safe, but it wasn't a place where they could truly belong. But could they really trust that the Carters would want them forever? Officer Daniels visited them often, checking in to see how they were feeling. He noticed that each time he mentioned the Carters, the twins seemed thoughtful but unsure. They had been let down before, and trusting again wasn't easy. One afternoon, Mrs. Carter called Officer Daniels. "We'd love for Maya and Mia to come over for the weekend," she said warmly. "No pressure, just some time for them to get comfortable." When Officer Daniels told the twins, they hesitated. What if they changed their minds? Maya asked softly, staring at the floor. "What if they don't want us anymore?" Officer Daniels knelt beside them, his voice gentle. "The Carters invited you because they care. They wouldn't have asked if they didn't mean it, but you don't have to go if you don't feel ready." Mia looked at Maya, then at Officer Daniels. "Can you come with us?" he asked. Officer Daniels smiled. "I can drop you off and check in, but this is your chance to see if you feel comfortable with them. You get to decide." After some thought, the twins agreed. That Friday, Officer Daniels drove them back to the Carters' home. This time, they carried small bags with their belongings, just in case. Mrs. Carter greeted them at the door with the same warm smile. "Welcome back, sweethearts. We're so happy to see you." The weekend was filled with simple, quiet moments that made the twins feel like they were part of something real. They baked cookies with Mrs. Carter, helped Mr. Carter water the plants in the backyard, and even watched a movie together in the living room. There was no pressure, no expectations, just kindness and warmth. At bedtime, Maya and Mia lay in the twin beds in their temporary room. The house was quiet, but not in a lonely way. It was peaceful. "Do you think we could stay here forever?" Mia whispered. Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe." The next morning, as they ate breakfast, Mrs. Carter sat down with them. "We love having you here," she said softly. "And if you ever want this to be your home, we'd love that too." Maya and Mia exchanged a look, their hearts pounding. It wasn't just words, it felt real. When Officer Daniels came to check on them, he could see the change in their faces. There was still fear, but now there was something stronger. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had found where they truly belonged. For the next few days, Maya and Mia couldn't stop thinking about the Carters' home. The warmth of the house, the kindness of Mrs. Carter, the gentle way Mr. Carter spoke to them. It all felt so different from what they had been used to. At the children's home, they were safe, but it wasn't a place where they could truly belong. But could they really trust that the Carters would want them forever? Officer Daniels visited them often, checking in to see how they were feeling. He noticed that each time he mentioned the Carters, the twins seemed thoughtful but unsure. They had been let down before, and trusting again wasn't easy. One afternoon, Mrs. Carter called Officer Daniels. "We'd love for Maya and Mia to come over for the weekend," she said warmly. "No pressure, just some time for them to get comfortable." When Officer Daniels told the twins, they hesitated. What if they changed their minds? Maya asked softly, staring at the floor. "What if they don't want us anymore?" Officer Daniels knelt beside them, his voice gentle. "The Carters invited you because they care. They wouldn't have asked if they didn't mean it, but you don't have to go if you don't feel ready." Mia looked at Maya, then at Officer Daniels. "Can you come with us?" he asked. Officer Daniels smiled. "I can drop you off and check in, but this is your chance to see if you feel comfortable with them. You get to decide." After some thought, the twins agreed. That Friday, Officer Daniels drove them back to the Carters' home. This time, they carried small bags with their belongings, just in case. Mrs. Carter greeted them at the door with the same warm smile. "Welcome back, sweethearts. We're so happy to see you." The weekend was filled with simple, quiet moments that made the twins feel like they were part of something real. They baked cookies with Mrs. Carter, helped Mr. Carter water the plants in the backyard, and even watched a movie together in the living room. There was no pressure, no expectations, just kindness and warmth. At bedtime, Maya and Mia lay in the twin beds in their temporary room. The house was quiet, but not in a lonely way. It was peaceful. "Do you think we could stay here forever?" Mia whispered. Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe." The next morning, as they ate breakfast, Mrs. Carter sat down with them. "We love having you here," she said softly. "And if you ever want this to be your home, we'd love that too." Maya and Mia exchanged a look, their hearts pounding. It wasn't just words, it felt real. When Officer Daniels came to check on them, he could see the change in their faces. There was still fear, but now there was something stronger. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had found where they truly belonged.